The crying started at 2:47 a.m. Jonathan Pierce sat up in the dark, his chest tight. It wasn't the first time, but tonight something felt different. He walked down the hall and stopped just outside the nursery door. Then he heard her voice, soft, steady, speaking words that made his blood run cold. "I know, sweet girl, I know. Your mama's watching. She sent me to you." Welcome back to this new thrilling story today. If you want more heartfelt stories that will move you to tears and remind you what truly matters, hit subscribe right now. That's your only chance to ensure you don't miss a single moment. Now back to the story. Jonathan's hand hovered over the doorknob, but he didn't push it open. His heart pounded in his ears. Inside the nursery, Tiana Walker knelt between the two cribs, her uniform wrinkled from a long day, her hair tied back in a loose bun. Caleb's cries had softened to whimpers. Chloe was already quiet, her tiny fingers wrapped around the maid's thumb. Tiana's voice was barely a whisper, but it filled the room like a lullaby. "Your daddy's strong, but he's scared. He doesn't know how to hold you without breaking. So I'll hold you until he learns." Jonathan took a step back. His throat burned. He had hired her to clean, to organize, to stay out of the way. But she had done something far more dangerous. She had stepped into the space his wife left behind. Jonathan didn't sleep the rest of the night. He sat in his study with the lights off, staring at nothing. The house around him was silent again. It had been that way for 8 months, ever since Elena died. 8 months since he became a father and a widower in the same breath. He could still remember the call. He'd been in a conference room, negotiating a merger. His assistant interrupted, something she never did. "Mr. Pierce, it's the hospital." He made it there in 12 minutes, but it was already over. Elena was gone. The twins were in incubators, too small, too fragile. Jonathan stood in the hallway and felt nothing, just a hollow ache where his heart used to be. The twins stayed in the NICU for 6 weeks. He visited twice. Both times he stood behind the glass and watched nurses tend to them. He didn't hold them. He didn't ask questions. He was terrified that if he let himself love them, he'd lose them too. When they came home, he hired a full staff, a day nurse, a night nurse, a pediatric specialist, and Tiana Walker, a housekeeper who was supposed to stay invisible. She'd started 3 weeks ago, quiet, efficient, unobtrusive, until tonight. At 7:03 a.m. Tiana arrived. Jonathan watched from the top of the stairs as she entered through the side door. She moved with quiet efficiency, tying on her apron and filling the kettle. She didn't see him. He descended the stairs slowly. Tiana turned at the sound of his footsteps. Her expression remained calm. "Good morning, Mr. Pierce." "Morning." She poured water into a teapot. "Would you like breakfast?" "No." Silence settled between them. "I heard you last night," Jonathan said. Tiana paused just for a heartbeat. Then she continued pouring. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." She set the kettle down and faced him. Her eyes were steady, unflinching. "The twins were crying," she said quietly. "I thought I could help." "You're not their nurse." "I know." "Then why were you in their room?" Tiana folded her hands. "Because no one else was." The words landed like a slap. Jonathan's jaw tightened. "There's a night nurse. That's her job." "She was asleep in the sitting room." "Then you should have woken her." "I tried." Jonathan stared at her. Tiana didn't look away. "What you said to them," he continued, his voice low, "about their mother. How do you know about her?" Tiana's expression softened. "Her pictures are everywhere, Mr. Pierce. Her journal is still on the nursery shelf. The blanket she knitted is in Chloe's crib." "That doesn't give you the right to..." "To what?" Her voice was still calm, but something shifted. "To comfort them? To let them know they're not alone?" Jonathan's breath caught. Tiana stepped forward slightly. "They're babies, Mr. Pierce. They don't understand why the world is cold. They just know that it is." He wanted to argue, to remind her of her place. But he couldn't, because she was right. Tiana left the kitchen without another word. Jonathan stood there alone, the faint scent of chamomile tea lingering in the air. Upstairs he heard it, the soft sound of Tiana's voice, humming. And then, silence. The twins had stopped crying. Jonathan avoided the nursery for 3 days. He told himself it was because he was busy. Board meetings, conference calls, an acquisition in Tokyo that required his attention. But the truth was simpler. He couldn't stop hearing Tiana's voice in his head. Your mama's watching. She sent me to you. Every time he passed the nursery door, he felt his chest tighten. He'd pause, listen for a moment, then keep walking. The twins were quiet now. They barely cried anymore. He should have been relieved. Instead, it unsettled him. On the fourth night, it happened again. Jonathan woke at 3:12 a.m. to the sound of crying. Not loud, just soft, broken whimpers that drifted down the hall like an echo. He sat up, his heart already racing. The night nurse should have been there. But the house was still. Jonathan threw off the covers and walked toward the nursery, his bare feet silent on the marble floor. As he got closer, he heard it. Tiana's voice. She was whispering again. He stopped just outside the door, his hand hovering near the frame. He didn't push it open. He just stood there, listening. I know, sweetheart. I know it hurts. Her voice was so soft it was almost inaudible. But you're not alone. You're never alone. Caleb's whimpering quieted. Your mama loved you so much, Tiana continued. She fought so hard to bring you into this world. And even though she's not here, she's watching. She's always watching. Jonathan's throat went dry. She left pieces of herself everywhere. In the way your daddy looks at you, even when he's scared, in the color of your eyes. In the way you hold on when you sleep. Chloe made a small sound, something between a sigh and a hum. Tiana's voice trembled. She would have sung to you every night. She would have held you until you fell asleep. And she would have told you every single day that you are loved. Jonathan's hand curled into a fist. So I'll do it for her, Tiana whispered. Until your daddy's ready. I'll hold you. I'll sing to you. I'll make sure you know. Silence, then softly Tiana began to hum. It was a melody Jonathan recognized instantly. Elena used to hum it while she worked, while she cooked, while she sat by the window with her hand on her belly, talking to the twins before they were born. Jonathan's breath hitched. How did Tiana know that song? If you think children deserve to hear their mother's memory, spoken with love, not buried in silence, drop a like. Only those who believe pain should stay hidden and won't engage. And inside the nursery, the crying stopped completely. Jonathan pressed his back against the wall, his chest heaving. He wanted to push the door open, to demand answers, to tell her she had no right to speak about Elena like she knew her. But he couldn't move because part of him, some deep, buried part, was grateful. Grateful that someone was saying the things he couldn't. Grateful that his children were hearing their mother's name spoken with love instead of silence. Grateful that they weren't growing up in a house where she was erased, but gratitude felt like betrayal. Jonathan turned and walked back to his room. He closed the door behind him and sat on the edge of the bed, his hands shaking. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. And when morning came, he still didn't know what to say. Jonathan began watching her, not openly, not obviously, but from the shadows of his own house. He observed the woman who had become a ghost in his home, present, essential, and completely unknown. Tiana moved through the mansion like water, smooth, unobtrusive. She dusted the bookshelves in the library, folded laundry in the utility room, wiped down counters in the kitchen. And she hummed, always that same melody, Elena's melody. Jonathan stood at the top of the stairs one morning, hidden behind the column, and watched as Tiana passed through the foyer with a basket of linens. Her lips moved softly, the tune barely audible but unmistakable. His jaw tightened. She had no right to that song. Later that afternoon, he found her in the nursery. The door was cracked open. Jonathan paused outside, his hand resting on the frame. Tiana was changing Chloe's diaper, her movements gentle and practiced. She spoke in a low, soothing voice. "There we go, sweet girl. All clean." Chloe didn't cry. She just stared up at Tiana with wide, curious eyes. Tiana smiled, soft, genuine, unguarded. Then she leaned down and pressed a light kiss to Chloe's forehead. Jonathan's chest twisted. He turned and walked away before she could see him. That evening, he summoned Margaret Hale, his head of staff. Margaret had worked for the Pierce family for over a decade. She was meticulous, loyal, and unshakable. If anyone knew about Tiana, it would be her. She arrived in his study at exactly 6 p.m., hands folded, posture perfect. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Pierce?" "Yes," Jonathan gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit." Margaret sat, her expression polite but wary. Jonathan leaned back in his chair. "Tell me about Tiana Walker." Margaret's brow furrowed slightly. "The housekeeper?" "Yes." "She's been with us for 3 weeks, punctual, thorough. No complaints." "That's not what I asked." Margaret hesitated. "I'm not sure I understand." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "Where did she come from? What's her background? Why did the agency send her?" "The agency sent her resume, clean record, previous domestic experience. No references, but—" "No references?" Jonathan interrupted. "It's not uncommon, sir. Some employees prefer to keep their work history private. Or they have something to hide." Margaret shifted in her seat. "If you'd like, I can request a more detailed background check." "Do it." "Of course," she paused. "May I ask why the sudden concern?" Jonathan didn't answer immediately. He tapped his fingers on the desk, his mind turning. "She's been spending time with the twins," he said finally. "She helps when the nurses are occupied. I assume that was acceptable." "I didn't say it wasn't." Margaret waited. Jonathan leaned forward. "What do you know about her personally?" "Very little, sir. She keeps to herself, eats lunch alone, doesn't socialize with the other staff." Margaret's tone softened. "But she's kind. The others respect her." "Kind," Jonathan repeated, the word tasting bitter. Margaret nodded. "She's good with the children, Mr. Pierce. That much is clear." Jonathan's jaw clenched. That was the problem. Hit subscribe if you believe fear shouldn't stop us from letting people in. The next morning, Jonathan found Tiana in the kitchen, preparing bottles for the twins. She looked up when he entered, her expression calm as always. "Mr. Pierce, we need to talk." Tiana set down the bottle she was holding. "Of course," Jonathan crossed his arms. "I want to know who you are." Tiana tilted her head slightly. "I'm not sure what you mean. Where did you work before this? Why are there no references? Why do you know things about my wife that no one told you?" Tiana's eyes softened, but she didn't look away. "I'm just a housekeeper, Mr. Pierce, nothing more." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Silence filled the space between them. Jonathan took a step closer. "Stay away from my children." Tiana's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, something that looked like sadness. "As you wish," she said quietly. Then she turned and walked out. Jonathan didn't see Tiana for 2 days. She kept to the lower floors, cleaning, organizing, staying out of sight. The night nurse resumed her duties in the nursery. The day nurse handled feedings and diaper changes. Everything returned to how it was before, except the twins started crying again. On the 3rd night, Jonathan couldn't take it anymore. He found Tiana in the laundry room, folding linens with mechanical precision. She didn't look up when he entered. "We're not done talking," Jonathan said. Tiana's hands paused for a fraction of a second. Then she continued folding. "I thought we were." "You didn't answer my question." "You didn't ask a question, Mr. Pierce. You gave an order." Jonathan stepped closer. How do you know about my wife? Tiana set down the towel she was holding and finally looked at him. Her eyes were calm, but there was something underneath, something that looked like patience wearing thin. I see her every day, Tiana said simply. Jonathan's jaw tightened. What's that supposed to mean? Tiana gestured toward the doorway. Walk with me. She led him upstairs. Jonathan followed, confusion and irritation warring inside him. Tiana stopped in the hallway outside the nursery and pointed to the wall. A framed photograph hung there. Elena, heavily pregnant, standing in front of the unfinished nursery. She was smiling, her hand resting on her belly. She's here, Tiana said softly. She walked into the nursery. Jonathan hesitated, then followed. Tiana moved to the bookshelf and pulled out a leather-bound journal. She held it up. Her handwriting, her thoughts, her dreams for them. She set the journal down and crossed to Chloe's crib. She picked up a pale yellow blanket, hand-knitted, slightly uneven. She made this. You can see where she dropped a stitch and started over. Tiana's voice was gentle. She didn't give up. She kept going until it was finished. Jonathan stared at the blanket. He'd seen it 100 times. He'd never really looked at it. Tiana turned to face him. I didn't need anyone to tell me about your wife, Mr. Pierce. She left herself everywhere, in every corner of this house, in every choice she made. Jonathan's throat tightened. That doesn't give you the right. The right to what? Tiana's voice remained calm, but her eyes held his. To see her, to honor her, to make sure her children know she existed. To act like you know her, Jonathan snapped. I don't know her, Tiana said quietly. But I know what she wanted, because it's written in every page of that journal. It's sewn into that blanket. It's painted on these walls. She gestured around the room, the soft colors, the carefully chosen furniture, the mobile hanging above the cribs. She wanted them to be loved, Mr. Pierce, without fear, without hesitation. Jonathan's hands curled into fists. You're overstepping. Am I? Tiana stepped closer, her voice steady. Or are you understepping? The words hit like a punch. Jonathan's jaw clenched. You don't know anything about me. I know you're afraid, Tiana said softly. I know you think if you keep your distance, it won't hurt as much if something happens. But they're already here, Mr. Pierce. They're already alive, and they need someone who isn't afraid to love them. Silence filled the nursery. Jonathan's chest heaved. His mind screamed at him to say something, to put her in her place, to remind her she was just an employee, but the words wouldn't come, because she was right. If you think love requires courage, not perfection, leave a comment below. Focus on your duties, Jonathan said finally, his voice cold. Clean, organize, stay out of my family's business. Tiana's expression didn't change. She simply nodded. As you wish, Mr. Pierce. She walked past him and left the nursery. Jonathan stood alone, surrounded by Elena's ghost, and for the first time in 8 months, he let himself cry. Jonathan woke the next morning with a decision already made. He was their father, not Tiana, not the nurses, him. It was time he started acting like it. At 9:00 a.m., he dismissed the day nurse. She looked surprised but didn't argue. Of course, Mr. Pierce, should I return this afternoon? No, I'll handle it. The nurse nodded and left. Jonathan stood in the hallway outside the nursery, his heart pounding. He took a breath, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. Caleb and Chloe were awake, lying in their cribs. Chloe stared at the mobile above her. Caleb gnawed on his fist, his face scrunched in concentration. Jonathan approached Caleb's crib first. Hey, buddy, he said softly. Caleb didn't look up at him. Jonathan reached down and carefully lifted him out of the crib. The baby felt impossibly small in his hands, fragile, delicate, breakable. Caleb's body went stiff. It's okay, Jonathan murmured. It's just me. Caleb's face crumpled. Then he screamed. Jonathan's chest tightened. He adjusted his hold, trying to cradle Caleb the way he'd seen the nurses do it. But the baby only screamed louder, his tiny fist flailing. Caleb, please. The screaming intensified. Jonathan's hands started to shake. He tried rocking him, tried humming, tried everything he could think of. Nothing worked. Caleb's cries filled the nursery, raw and desperate. Jonathan set him back in the crib, his hands trembling. Caleb kept screaming. Jonathan turned to Chloe. She was watching him now, her wide eyes unblinking. Okay, Jonathan whispered, let's try this again. He lifted Chloe gently. She didn't scream, but she didn't relax either. Her body stayed rigid, her face turned away from him. Chloe, it's me. It's Dad. She didn't respond. She just stared at the wall, her tiny hands curled into fists. Jonathan's throat burned. Please, sweetheart, just look at me. Chloe turned her head further away. Behind him, the door opened. Jonathan didn't need to turn around to know who it was. I heard crying, Tiana said quietly. Jonathan closed his eyes. I told you to stay out of this. I know. Silence. Then Caleb's screams grew louder. Jonathan exhaled slowly and stepped back. Fine. Tiana moved past him without a word. She approached Caleb's crib, leaned down and scooped him up in one smooth motion. Caleb's cries stuttered, then stopped. Tiana held him against her chest, her hand cradling the back of his head. She hummed softly, the same melody she always hummed. Caleb's body relaxed. His tiny fingers curled into the fabric of her uniform. Jonathan's chest twisted. Tiana glanced at Chloe, still in Jonathan's arms. The baby's face was still turned away, her body tense. May I? Tiana asked. Jonathan didn't answer. He just handed Chloe over. The moment Tiana took her, Chloe's entire body softened. She nestled into Tiana's shoulder, her eyes drifting closed. Tiana held both twins effortlessly, her arms steady, her voice a low hum. Jonathan stood there, empty-handed. They don't know me, he said quietly. Tiana didn't look at him. They know you. Then why? They don't feel safe with you yet. The words cut deeper than any accusation. Jonathan's hands clenched at his sides. I'm their father. I know. Then why do they look at you like that? Why do they stop crying the second you walk in? Tiana finally met his eyes. Because I'm not afraid of them. Jonathan's breath caught. They feel what you feel, Mr. Pierce, Tiana continued softly. Your fear, your grief, your guilt. They don't understand it, but they feel it, and it scares them. Jonathan looked away. So what am I supposed to do? Stop being afraid. I can't. Then let someone help you. Jonathan watched as Tiana gently laid Caleb back in his crib, then Chloe. Both babies stayed calm, their eyes heavy with sleep. She stepped back, her hands folded in front of her. Jonathan stood frozen, caught between jealousy and relief. Jealousy that his children reached for someone else. Relief that they reached for someone at all. Thank you, he said finally, the words barely audible. Tiana nodded. They need you, Mr. Pierce, but they need you whole. She walked past him and left the nursery. Jonathan stayed, staring down at his sleeping children. And for the first time, he wondered if he'd ever be enough. Jonathan didn't leave the nursery for an hour. He sat in the rocking chair Elena had picked out, staring at the cribs, watching his children sleep. They looked peaceful now, content. They looked nothing like him. A soft knock pulled him from his thoughts. Tiana stood in the doorway, holding something in her hands. I'm sorry to disturb you, she said quietly. Jonathan straightened. What is it? Tiana stepped inside, her movements cautious. She held out the leather-bound journal he'd seen before, the one from the shelf. I think you should read this, she said. Jonathan stared at it. I've seen it. "Have you read it?" He didn't answer. Tiana set the journal on the small table beside the rocking chair. She wrote to them, every day, for months. Jonathan's throat tightened. "I know." "Then you know she left them something," Tiana said softly. "Something you need to see." She turned to leave. "Wait." Tiana paused. Jonathan looked down at the journal, his hands trembling. "Stay." Tiana hesitated, then nodded. She sat on the floor near the door, her back against the wall, giving him space. Jonathan opened the journal. Elena's handwriting filled the pages, looping, elegant, unmistakably hers. The entries were dated, starting from the day she found out she was pregnant, January 14th. "I'm scared, terrified actually, but also hopeful. Jonathan doesn't know yet. I'm going to tell him tonight. I hope he's ready. I hope we both are." Jonathan's vision blurred. He turned the page. February 3rd. Twins. 2 heartbeats. I cried in the doctor's office. Jonathan held my hand so tight I thought he'd break it. He didn't say anything, but I saw it in his eyes. He's already in love with them. Jonathan's breath hitched. He kept reading. Months passed in those pages. Elena's excitement, her fears, her plans for the nursery, her dreams of what their lives would be. Then he reached the final entries. August 22nd. I'm running out of time. I can feel it. The doctors don't say it, but I know. Something's wrong. I'm not afraid for me. I'm afraid for them. For Jonathan. He's strong, but he's fragile in ways he doesn't let anyone see. If something happens to me, he'll retreat. He'll build walls. He'll try to protect himself by staying distant. But these babies need him. Not the version of him that's afraid. The version that loves without armor. Jonathan's hands shook. He turned to the last page. August 29th. If I don't make it. Someone needs to tell Jonathan this. The twins don't need perfection. They don't need a father who has all the answers. They just need someone who shows up. Someone who holds them even when it's hard. Someone who loves them without fear. If he can't do that yet, find someone who can. Find someone who will stand in the gap until he's ready. And Jonathan, if you're reading this, please don't blame yourself. Please don't let grief turn you into stone. Our children need your heart, not your guilt. I love you. Always. Elena. Jonathan closed the journal. His chest heaved. His throat burned. Then the dam broke. Subscribe if you believe healing starts when we stop hiding our pain. He buried his face in his hands and sobbed. Deep, wrenching sobs that tore through him like a storm. All the grief he'd buried, all the guilt he'd carried, all the fear he'd hidden behind control, it all came flooding out. He cried for Elena, for the life they'd lost, for the father he wasn't, for the children who didn't feel safe in his arms. He cried until there was nothing left. When he finally looked up, Tiana was still there. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. She just sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, her presence steady. Jonathan wiped his eyes, his voice raw. She knew. Yes, Tiana said softly. She knew I'd fall apart. She knew you'd need time. Jonathan looked at her, his vision still blurred. Is that why you're here? Tiana's eyes softened. I'm here because they need someone, Mr. Pierce, and so do you. Jonathan's breath shuddered. Tiana rose slowly and walked to the door. She paused, her hand on the frame. She didn't ask you to be perfect, Tiana said quietly. She just asked you to try. Then she left him alone with his wife's words. The storm came without warning. Thunder cracked across the sky at 2:34 a.m., rattling the windows and shaking the walls. Rain hammered against the roof in violent sheets. Jonathan jolted awake, his heart already racing. Then he heard it, the twins, crying in unison. He threw off the covers and ran. The hallway was dark, illuminated only by flashes of lightning. Jonathan's bare feet pounded against the floor as another clap of thunder shook the house. He reached the nursery and pushed the door open. Tiana was already there. She knelt between the cribs, her hair loose around her shoulders, her nightgown simple and pale. She wasn't supposed to be there. Her quarters were on the opposite wing. But she was there, Caleb screamed, his tiny fists flailing. Chloe wailed, her face red and streaked with tears. Tiana's hands moved between them, soothing, steadying. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's just noise. It can't hurt you." Thunder boomed again. Both twins shrieked. Tiana's voice remained calm. "Your mama's watching. She sent me to you. You're safe, I promise." Jonathan froze in the doorway. He had heard those words before, but tonight they didn't make him angry. Tonight they broke something open inside him. Tiana glanced up and saw him. Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't speak. Jonathan stepped forward, his throat tight. "Let me help." Tiana hesitated, then nodded. Jonathan knelt beside her, his knees touching the soft rug Elena had chosen. He looked down at Caleb, whose cries had softened to whimpers under Tiana's touch. "What do I do?" Jonathan asked, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Just be here," Tiana said gently. "Let him feel you." Jonathan swallowed hard. Slowly he reached into the crib. His hand hovered over Caleb's chest. The baby's eyes were wide, red-rimmed, full of fear. Jonathan's hand trembled. "They feel what you feel." He closed his eyes, took a breath, and let his palm rest gently on Caleb's tiny chest. Caleb went still. Jonathan's eyes snapped open. The baby didn't scream, didn't pull away. He just stared up at Jonathan, his breathing uneven but calming. Jonathan's voice cracked. "I'm here, buddy. I'm right here." Thunder rumbled again, softer this time. Caleb's eyes didn't leave his father's face. Beside them, Tiana lifted Chloe from her crib and cradled her close. The little girl's cries faded into hiccups as Tiana hummed softly, the melody that had become a lifeline in this house. Jonathan kept his hand on Caleb's chest, feeling the rapid rise and fall begin to slow. "I'm sorry," Jonathan whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry I wasn't here. I'm sorry I didn't know how." Caleb's tiny hand shifted. His fingers brushed against Jonathan's wrist. Jonathan's breath caught. It was small, barely anything. But it was contact. It was trust. If you think love is stronger than fear, drop a like right now. The storm raged outside, but inside the nursery, the chaos quieted. Tiana rocked Chloe gently, her voice a low hum. Jonathan stayed kneeling beside Caleb, his hands still resting on his son's chest. "You're doing it," Tiana said softly. Jonathan looked at her, his eyes wet. "Doing what?" "Showing up." Jonathan's jaw trembled. He looked back down at Caleb, who had finally closed his eyes, his breathing deep and even. "He didn't pull away," Jonathan whispered. "No," Tiana said gently. "He didn't." They stayed like that for a long time, Jonathan kneeling beside the crib, Tiana rocking Chloe, the storm slowly fading into distant rumbles. When Chloe finally fell asleep, Tiana laid her back in her crib. She glanced at Jonathan, who hadn't moved. "You should rest," she said quietly. Jonathan shook his head. "Not yet." Tiana nodded. She walked to the rocking chair and sat, keeping watch. Jonathan stayed on the floor beside his son, his hands still resting on Caleb's chest. And for the first time since Elena died, he didn't feel like he was failing. He felt like he was finally learning. Outside, the rain turned to drizzle. Inside, two babies slept, and a father began to heal. Jonathan found Tiana in the garden the next morning. She sat on the stone bench near the fountain, her hands folded in her lap, her face turned toward the early sun. She looked smaller out here, vulnerable in a way she never seemed inside the house. He approached slowly, his footsteps soft on the gravel path. Tiana glanced up. Mr. Pierce? Jonathan, he said quietly. Just Jonathan. She nodded but didn't speak. He sat beside her, leaving space between them. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The fountain trickled. Birds sang in the distance. I need to know something, Jonathan said finally. Tiana turned to him, her expression calm but guarded. Why are you really here? He asked. Why do you care so much about two children who aren't yours? Tiana's eyes flickered with something, pain, maybe, or memory. She looked down at her hands. I had a daughter once. Jonathan went still. Her name was Lily. Tiana's voice was soft, distant. She was 3 years old, beautiful, smart, full of life. Jonathan's chest tightened. What happened? Pneumonia. Tiana's fingers twisted together. It came so fast. One day she had a cough. 2 days later, she couldn't breathe. I took her to the hospital, but she trailed off. Jonathan didn't push. She died in my arms, Tiana whispered. I held her until the end, and I couldn't do anything. Couldn't save her. Couldn't stop it. Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. I'm sorry, Jonathan said, the words painfully inadequate. Tiana nodded. It's been 6 years. Some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like a lifetime ago. Is that why you became a maid? Jonathan asked gently. To stay busy? Partly. Tiana looked up at the sky. But also because I needed to be around life again. Around people who needed care. I couldn't save my daughter, but I could help someone else's children. Even in small ways. Jonathan's throat burned. Caleb and Chloe. They remind me what it feels like to love without expecting anything back. Tiana said quietly. They don't know my grief. They don't carry my pain. They just are. And being near them makes me feel human again. Jonathan exhaled slowly. I don't want you to be their maid anymore. Tiana's eyes widened slightly. I want you to stay, Jonathan continued. Not as staff, as family. Tiana shook her head. Mr. Pierce, Jonathan. Jonathan, she corrected softly. I can't. I'm not her. I know. Your children had a mother. They still do. In every way that matters. I can't replace her. I'm not asking you to. Tiana looked at him, her eyes searching his face. Elena wrote in her journal, Jonathan said, his voice steady despite the emotion beneath it. She said if she didn't make it, I should find someone who could love them without fear. Someone who could stand in the gap until I was ready. Tiana's breath hitched. You're not replacing her, Tiana, Jonathan said. You're honoring her. You're doing exactly what she asked. Tiana's hands trembled. What if I fail them? You won't. You don't know that. I do. Jonathan's voice was firm. Because you already loved them, and that's all they need. Tiana looked away, blinking rapidly. Stay, Jonathan said again, quieter this time. Please. They need you. I need you. Tiana was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. Jonathan exhaled, relief flooding through him. Thank you. Tiana wiped her eyes quickly and stood. I should check on the twins. Tiana, she turned. You're not just doing this for them, Jonathan said. You're allowed to heal too. Tiana's lips trembled into the smallest smile. Maybe, she said softly. Maybe we all are. Hit subscribe if you believe healing happens when we choose to love again, even after loss. Then she walked back toward the house. Jonathan stayed on the bench watching her go. For the first time in months, the weight on his chest felt lighter. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Tiana found it in the morning mail, a crisp white envelope with the logo of a prestigious domestic agency embossed on the front. She opened it in the kitchen, her hand steady, but her heart already sinking. Dear Ms. Walker, we are pleased to offer you a position with the Montgomery family in Boston. The role includes full benefits, private quarters, and a salary significantly above industry standard. The family has specifically requested someone with your experience and temperament. Please respond within 1 week. Tiana set the letter down, her chest tight. Boston, a fresh start, a family that didn't know her pain, a place where she could disappear into routine again. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt torn in half. That evening, she found Jonathan in the nursery. He was sitting in the rocking chair, holding Chloe against his chest. The baby's eyes were closed, her tiny hand curled around his finger. Tiana hesitated in the doorway. Jonathan looked up. Everything okay? Tiana stepped inside, the letter folded in her hand. I need to talk to you. Jonathan's expression shifted. He gently laid Chloe in her crib and stood. What is it? Tiana handed him the letter. Jonathan read it in silence. His jaw tightened. When he finished, he folded it carefully and handed it back. That's a good offer, he said quietly. It is. You'd be set for years. I know. Silence filled the space between them. Are you going to take it? Jonathan asked. Tiana looked down at the letter. I don't know. Jonathan stepped closer. What do you want? Tiana's throat burned. I want to do the right thing. What's the right thing? I don't know that either. Jonathan exhaled slowly. He looked over at the cribs where Caleb and Chloe slept peacefully. Then he looked back at Tiana. I'm not going to beg, he said quietly. I won't trap you here with guilt or obligation. Tiana's chest tightened. But I will tell you the truth, Jonathan continued. They need you. I need you. Not because you are convenient, not because you're good at your bum, but because you've become part of this family. Tiana's eyes burned. You brought life back into this house, Jonathan said, his voice thick with emotion. You made my children feel safe. You made me remember what it's like to hope. He stepped closer, his eyes locked on hers. So if you want to go, go. I won't stop you. But if you stay, it won't be as a maid. It'll be as someone who belongs here, as someone who's chosen, as family. Tiana's breath shuddered. The choice is yours, Jonathan said softly. Tiana didn't answer right away. She looked at the letter in her hand, then at the cribs, then at Jonathan. She thought about Lily, about the life she'd lost, about the walls she'd built to protect herself from loving again. Then she thought about Caleb reaching for her in the dark, about Chloe's tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb, about Jonathan's broken voice whispering thank you in the storm. She folded the letter and slipped it into her pocket. I'm staying, she said quietly. Jonathan's shoulders sagged with relief. You're sure? Tiana nodded, a small smile breaking through. I'm sure. 3 weeks later, the house was different. Laughter echoed through the halls. The twins babbled and cooed. The nursery wasn't a place of silence anymore. It was full of life. One evening, Jonathan sat on the floor with Chloe in his lap. She giggled as he made silly faces, her hands reaching for his nose. Across the room, Tiana fed Caleb, humming softly. The baby watched her with waves of trusting eyes. Jonathan looked over at them and smiled. She's got your attention, he said. Tiana glanced up. He's a good eater. Takes after his mom, Jonathan said softly. Tiana's smile was gentle. Yes, he does. Chloe squealed, pulling Jonathan's focus back. He kissed her forehead and held her close. For the first time since Elena died, Jonathan felt whole. Not because the pain was gone, but because he'd finally let someone help him carry it. Outside, the sun set over the estate. Inside, a broken family had begun to heal. And in the quiet spaces between laughter and love, Elena's presence lingered. Not as a ghost, but as a gift. If you believe family isn't just blood, it's who shows up when it matters, leave a comment and hit subscribe. Only those who think love should stay behind walls won't engage.